Yeah. So, friends, the meaning of that chant is Namo Buddhaya. Now, it's not a normal chant that you normally hear in most Buddhist temples. But of course, it means homage to the Buddha. As I mentioned before, the word Buddha can mean has two different meanings: the external Buddha and the internal Buddha. So the external Buddha, meaning the historical Siddhartha Gautama, who lived and taught the Dhamma, attained enlightenment. But he was called the Buddha because he had a certain knowledge. Just as you would call a doctor, you call a doctor he's a surgeon because you have knowledge of surgery, or an ophthalmologist, you have knowledge of sight and so on. So the Buddha was called the Buddha because he had knowledge of the mind, the knowledge of the enlightened mind, or the true nature of the mind. And he taught that every person has that fundamental liberated dimension of the mind, or we call it nirvana or I like to call it just basically a pure awareness, or uh, the present moment awareness anyway, a unifying factor of underlying life force of whole existence. Anyway, so especially when we are practicing meditation, the chanting of the Namo Buddhaya, referring to that vibration of pure awareness that's, deep inside, underneath all the layers of our conditioned mind and ego and all of its conditionings and memories, is that sometimes called the ocean of the pure awareness or present moment. And it's that kind of awareness that, of course, most people know nothing about it. Most scientists don't even know nothing about it. But, that's the unborn principle, never born and never dies. But anyway, I'm mentioning that because it's very intrinsic to our life and intrinsic to our consciousness, and intrinsic in the practice of Dhamma as well. And let's go back a little bit. I want to take a little journey. Okay. I won't remember all that, but let's go back to the moment of conception, the mother's womb. So the mother and father provide an invisible, little molecule of DNA or chromosomes or whatever it is. And it forms a one-cell organism. And at that time of conception, according to the Buddhist sort of psychology, consciousness has also become attached to that, or has come to seek out and join that new developing being. And for 9 months, that undergoes cell division. In 9 months, after dividing billions and billions or trillions of times, it's formed this human baby, 7 or 8 pounds. And during that time, that spark of consciousness, or what is often called the relinking consciousness in Abhidhamma terms, is the spark of life that generates that evolving life. And it was occurring basically in the present moment. And with each cell division, that consciousness or awareness goes into each succeeding cell. So if you can kind of keep that mental picture in mind, so that basically every cell of the body is connected in what I call the inner internet. They're all connected through the nervous system, and they can communicate with each other. So all those different awarenesses and all the different cells, they're all interconnected and can communicate with each other. And that all occurred without IBM machines, without any doctors or anything else. It all happened as a product, you could say, of nature, momentum of nature, through, of course, the course of evolution. And it was occurring in the present moment, basically. And without any, sense of I or me or mine in it. But at the time of birth, and what happens at birth? Maybe mothers. Baby comes out, what's usually the first thing the doctor does? Cuts the cord, separates it from that life force. Now it's an individual little being. Then the parents give it a name. little Johnny, little Susie. And all the relatives come over and hold it, go goochie, goochie, goo, and calling it its name. And over several months or so, perhaps, or longer, you keep calling its name, and all of a sudden it starts to look. It starts to identify that name with, oh, they must be referring to this thing, me. Now, when the baby is first born, according to all the child developmental psychologists, or even your mothers will know that, there is no sense of I, me, or self in that young, newborn baby. It's what they call oceanic awareness. I mean, there was awareness, and it could feel things. It could even feel pain and so on, but there wasn't a little me or I behind the eyeballs thinking that all these things are happening to me. It was just instinctual kind of, sure. The doctor whacks it on the rump and goes, feels pleasure and pain. These are just instinctual kind of reactions, but there was no developed a nucleus or a sense of either yet. But then over time, especially when it starts to learn language, and then the parents teach it, the cat walks by and says, oh, kitty, kitty, that's daddy, daddy. That's brother, that's sister. It started learning language. It started to identify objects now as being certain things with a kind of a meaning. And especially the things that brought it pleasure or pain. So with the mother nursing the young baby and so on, and getting pleasurable feeling from that, there's that bond of, there's pleasurable feeling when they see the mother normally, because it caresses it very tenderly and kisses it and all these things. Whereas maybe the rough father or the uncle or somebody else comes and holds the baby a little bit rough and squeezes it too tightly and might have a feeling of pain. And then it starts to identify that face with pain. Then a sweet grandmother comes by and brings the baby its first chocolate. The baby tastes the chocolate and gets a big grin on its face. That sweet taste brings a pleasurable feeling. And that happens several times over, and then the baby starts to identify the face of the grandmother with a pleasurable feeling. And then this occurs with almost everything it starts to learn through language and through its experience. Maybe it grabbed something hot and it got burned. And so this, and as it starts to learn more things, and especially when it starts crawling, right? They call it the terrible twos or something. And it starts reaching out for things, and now it gets outside of itself. Before, the mind and body were basically kind of fused together. Now gradually it sees the outside world and develops going toward it. It loses that intimate connection to the present moment, and it starts wanting these things, going toward them. So its eyes are now in front of the body, looking at an object, or in the same way with aversion, it has that, not wanting to go there or to get away from a painful object. And so this is really the birth of the past and future in the mind. And it's very important because it's almost totally based on pleasure and pain. That means the baby starts wanting pleasurable feeling in the future, thinking about these objects that brought it pleasurable feeling in the past. It starts to remember and wants it again. And the things that brought it pain in the past, when he sees those things or even thinks about it again, it has aversion to that. And so almost everything that happens after that is based on pleasure and pain that's connected to the past and the future. And it wants pleasurable feeling that it doesn't have yet. And then if it gets it, it wants to hold on to it. You've seen babies and young kids holding on to an object, and the brother or sister comes over and give me that. So this, the craving and grasping and aversion is all based on the past and the future because of that disconnect from the body. And that, from the Dhamma point of view, in the sense of the Dhamma, that's really the beginning of suffering, is the disconnect from the body, or the disconnect from the present moment. Because I mentioned the body is the present moment for all intents and purposes. That means when you're feeling it, that's the mind is in the present moment, just here. But it becomes disconnected from that because it's developing this need for pleasurable feeling, and the further it gets away, further it goes into the future, the further it gets away from the body, the further it gets away from the present. And that's when all accidents happen. And so that disconnect from the present moment, the body, is really the beginning of the suffering. And then little by little, this sense of an I gets solidified. What used to be oceanic awareness now gets coagulates somehow and gets fixed and centered behind the eyeballs. Now there's a little me that's looking out the eyeballs. In the beginning, there wasn't that. And that's, the beginning of the ego, and that also gets solidified and remains with the person the whole rest of their life. And they start seeing everything in terms of me here and the world outside of itself. And there's this friction, this tug of war, because the baby is searching for a pleasurable feeling. It lost the natural pleasant feeling of the present moment. When it got disconnected from the body and starts focusing outside, it loses that connection of the subtle present moment awareness of cellular vibrations, and that's what it knew for 9 months. All it knew were these cellular vibrations, just producing hundreds and thousands of millions of them every single day. That 9 months in the womb. That's all it knows, was all these vibrations. So it gets connected from that, disconnected from that. And then it starts because the mind is always seeking for pleasure. And so if it's not getting pleasure from inside anymore, now it has to substitute the outside world to get its pleasure. And the fear of pain taking that pleasure away. And this begins the fight with the world. And, it continues the whole life, basically. Because no one has told us that's the way it works. So the young child grows up, he just watches the parents, or she, they, them, whatever, watching the parents, watching the neighbors, watching the kids in school. Now, of course, it's TV and it's internet and all these things. It's continually absorbing all these type of conditionings and not understanding how it's affecting their mind, because no one is telling them. I mean, sure, some people pay lip service. Oh, limit your child's internet or game, to 2 hours a day or something. They say limit, but they don't really explain the deeper meaning. And so, therefore, people find themselves, after many, many years, caught in these very tight habit patterns. And we've lost the sensitivity of the body. And so, as we're seeking after pleasure, we start consuming things that maybe are not good for us. Maybe they bring us a strong, pleasurable feeling for a few minutes or so, but then it has their side effects. They start consuming food that has nice taste, MSG or salt, or so many, food for taste, right? Then sounds that stimulate uh, their mind in some way, smells, body sensations, erotic feelings, and so on. It starts to crave and consume those because it's lost that natural connection to the body in the present moment. And because things are impermanent, those pleasurable feelings brought by those objects don't last. And so they have to go on getting another one. And that's the nature of craving and so on. That it cannot be satisfied because everything is impermanent. It's one of the other natural laws that the Buddha mentioned, the law of impermanence, and everything is constantly changing. But because of that, those pleasurable feelings don't change, and when they go away, they get replaced by a painful one. To get rid of that, they go out seeking more pleasure. And they get it in any way that they can. Or take it out on other people, or things, objects. I mean, you all know that, right? But people don't stop to really think about that very much. And they just let it happen because they don't have any alternative. No alternative. Except taking drugs or shock therapies or all kind of other things that the science and medicine is coming up with. But they bypass or they haven't understood the actual fundamental underlying source and nature of happiness, which is the mind being more in the present moment, which is connected to the happiness and the blissful vibration of the now, of the life force, of the present moment. And they've lost touch with that. And even scientists don't even know anything about it, unfortunately, because of religions and other kind of things that prevent science from looking there. They just get stuck in their whatever perceived models that they've developed and so on. But somebody like the Buddha then comes along who understood that. And so anyway, I don't want to belabor the point. But now coming back to so we've lost that connection with the body, really, the subtle vibrations, connection to the present moment. And so we don't hear the early warning signals. We've lost the ability to heal ourselves, right? So the body was made with all these fantastic interconnected systems, right? Respiration, metabolism, circulation, immune system, and so on. I mean, the body knew how to heal itself, didn't it? You cut your finger and then it sends messages out and cells go clot, get the blood clot, stop the bleeding. Or diseases, other things come into the body and the immune system is triggered off and they go gobble up those invading things and could take care of itself by and large. But because by and by we've interfered with those by consuming harmful substances that then affect the ability of our organs and glands and other things to function properly, that those systems have broken down in a lot of people. Now we have to go ask the doc, hey doc, what's wrong with me? X-ray the insides and find out what's going on. And then we take their word for it. But anyway, so basically that's the kind of situation that we find ourselves in, that we've lost that sensitivity to the present moment in the body, and because of consuming things, most of those things we consume have their harmful effects. So we do things just for short-term pleasure. We pick up bad habits, like the habit of smoking when you're a kid, or when I was a kid. True story, true confession. Okay, right? So you start smoking when you're maybe. Well, I didn't start smoking until maybe 16. Kids smoking at 12 years old now. It wasn't marijuana; it was cigarettes. And anyway, so you start smoking innocently enough, right? Eddie Haskell, the neighbor, comes over. Hey, try this cigarette. And then, so after time, you start coughing. What's the body trying to tell you? Don't do that. And so you start to light up a cigarette, and the body silently is inside saying, don't do that, don't do that. And the mind says, shut up. Right? Multiply that by 100 different things. We're just seeking that temporary high because we've lost the connection with the natural high of present moment awareness and the equanimity that comes with that. And all accidents are due to not being centered in the body, not being grounded in the present moment, or at least paying attention to what you're doing. Again, the example, you're cutting vegetables to prepare your meal for the evening and cut your finger because you were daydreaming about, later on, or the past, chewing up the past, not focused on the present. Will cut your finger, or worse, walking down the street, daydreaming, and you step in some duck doo-doo, or in a pothole and twist your ankle, or worse, go out, walk in the street, you almost get hit by a car. Like that, almost every single accident is due to not being mindful. Look at all these car accidents. People get distracted on their cell phone, not paying attention to what they're doing, or whatever. So many different, of course, causes, and wind up killing themselves and killing others. So it really all comes down. Almost every single accident is due to not being, centered in awareness, having mindfulness, paying attention to what you're doing. And so that's really, the Buddha understood all that. And so for him, it was a question, how do we get back to that natural condition? How do we get reconnected to the body? How do we get reconnected to the present moment so that we can experience more of that natural happiness or contentment, let's say contentment, without needing so much from the outside world that then complicates our lives dramatically. Because when we want things from the outside world, then we have to compromise, we have to scheme and plan and so many things, right? And we lose our attention. And then again, those objects bring us just a very short little pleasure, perhaps, or pleasant feeling, and is quickly replaced by usually painful feeling. And so that's really, the practice of Dhamma, you might say, in a very concise, direct, concise way. And that's why in the teachings of the Buddha, the Four Noble Truths, he was interested in the cause of suffering. And in his meditations, he understood it was desire and craving. It's the cause of suffering. But that desire and craving for the external world. That means that having been disconnected from the present moment Now trying to substitute sources of happiness from the outside, which we cannot control and are constantly changing, for something that was pretty much permanent. As long as you're breathing and the blood circulating through the body, those present moment awareness and pleasant sensations coming from that could be always there. Because as I mentioned before, all problems are problems of the past and the future. When the mind is resting in the present moment, there's nothing to judge, nothing to compare, nothing to desire, nothing to have aversion. It's being there in the present moment, kind of more or less floating from moment to moment without our memories of the past and the future getting in the way to cause us unnecessary actions that then bring their continued type of results. So that's why the Buddha mentioned craving is the source of suffering. Well, what's the source of craving? Okay, based on that whole kind of storyline. What's the cause of craving? Come on, I just explained it.
Looking to the outside.
Right. That means basically ignorance, not knowing the truth about consciousness, not knowing the truth about suffering and the cause of suffering. So because of that ignorance, it's funny, ignorance, right? We ignore the truth. Comes from ignore. So we're ignoring what is right in front of us, a quarter of an inch underneath our nose, this 100 and more pound of body. We ignore it, and we're looking at those bodies. Right? The external word, excuse me if I wanted to be an actor when I was younger. Okay, never mind. But that's really what people have, they're ignoring the truth. So one of the main, the whole Dhamma is basically oriented around how to get reconnected to the present moment. And the Buddhist teaching on the 4 foundations of mindfulness is really that kind of roadmap or the instructions of how to get reconnected to the body in the present moment in order to be able to see your thoughts more clearly. Because again, as I mentioned, the mind is operating through this body. This body is the real home for the mind. You think you live in a house, you all live in a house somewhere, right? You have an address, 2631 6th Street or whatever it is, right? Okay, that's where you entertain friends, sleep at night, make babies, do all kind of other things. But it's within this body that you live. Within this body with its nervous system and memory, it's really where you live. And so the 4 foundations of mindfulness is that process by which we gradually learn to get reconnected to the present moment, and therefore being able to see our thoughts. Because again, it's our thoughts that are ultimately the source of suffering. But we can't really get a hold of our thoughts or change them effectively because we haven't developed the mental technology. And so I'll try to get to in a bit. So, as I mentioned, all of our thoughts and memories are in the unconscious mind. And that they come up to the surface, but we don't see them coming up. because our mind is not centered in the body. It's distracted. It's looking out there, or it's half asleep. If you're not distracted, you're half asleep. So these are the two polarities. Either the mind is, just spaced out or asleep, or it's overly active in thinking, and so on. So, because we're not centered in the body, the thoughts come up. That means our impulses and urges come up, but we don't see them until they've already kind of broken on the surface. And then it's much harder to kind of let them go, because they trigger off when thoughts and urges are coming up through the unconscious. They're triggering off all kind of things within the nervous system, and they engage, like increase the blood pressure or trigger adrenaline and various things like that. And we don't even see that happening because we're not sensitive to that until it breaks on the surface, and it's grasped as me and mine, and or the struggle has already started, and it's harder to get rid of. So the Buddha understood this very clearly with his powerful meditation and his methodical training the mind to be able to actually go down into the unconscious and see those thoughts before they've triggered off our reactions. He saw that that is the key for transforming our actions, or changing the way that we think and react to things, and also how to remain more centered in the present moment. Now, I know I'm kind of talking on probably a fairly a deep level that it may be hard to understand for some, but it's really the key for understanding the mind and really the practice too, and also to understand the importance of why learning how to reconnect with the body and breathing and stay more grounded in that is really the key for the practice. And it's really not that difficult. And this is where the yoga comes into play, where it's important. Now, I know within the Buddhist teaching, yoga isn't mentioned specifically, really, as especially the popular kind of yoga exercise and pranayama that you've heard about, or maybe you've gone to a yoga studio. But the deeper meaning of that word is yoga is a meditation. But anyway, even that's where in the yoga system, asana and pranayama. See, in yoga, there's also an Eightfold Path. Now, in Buddhism, how many of you know the Eightfold Path by the Buddha? Only a few. The Eightfold Path. How many have heard of the Eightfold Path in yoga? A few, maybe not so many.
8 limbs.
Yeah, 8 limbs. Right? But and they're kind of similar, but the main difference is asana and pranayama. But they're not really that similar, as I think I might have mentioned it even yesterday. That in the yoga system, or even the Buddha knew that in order to meditate, you've got to have a strong body and nervous system, and to be able to sit straight and hold that for longer periods of time, so the mind can get more deeply concentrated. And to hold that position without so much pain or without going to sleep. Because the 3 main hindrances to meditation are sleepiness, pain, and just incessant thoughts. Those are the three main hindrances. And they can all be sort of mitigated or at least minimized through those practicing those certain types of stretches and the deep breathing, as I mentioned. Now, the deep, slow breathing, there's something interesting with that. Now, again, in the Buddhist teaching, you hardly hear any Buddhist teacher ever telling you to do deep breathing, or sort of control the breath. They always say, don't control the breath, don't control the breath. Just watch the natural breath. Yeah, watch the natural breath. That's the point. Is our breath natural? No, in the modern person, the breath has become unnatural because of poor postures, because of mental emotions. This all affects the breathing. It keeps it in a very short and shallow state for the most part. And it keeps the nervous system in its sympathetic mode. How many have heard about the nervous system? Sympathetic and parasympathetic aspects of the nervous system. And the sympathetic side is the reactive fight and flight response, whereas the sympathetic side is the more calm and relaxed side of the nervous system. But because of people's high-paced living and because of running around, being busy, filling up the day with so many things to do and worries and frustrations and that come along with all that, with families, getting in arguments, disagreements, and it's kept our mind and body, for longer times in the sympathetic mode, which is a lot more wear and tear. And deep breathing helps to slow that down, and deep, slow breathing helps to transfer or to shift the nervous system into its parasympathetic mode, or more relaxed, more present moment, relaxed state of awareness, just through deep, slow breathing. And the yogis saw that, and that's why they developed, the deep, slow breathing in order to affect that. And that's a natural way. That's not taking pills. That's using the natural way that the body was made to help to stay in a more relaxed and centered state of consciousness, which has a healing effect on the body. Because the body, when it's moving erratically and moving very fast and reactively, it's a lot of wear and tear on the joints and the organs, and it wears it down. But just the way the average person lives is not a healthy way from the standpoint of bodily harmony and well-being. And that's why the yoga exercises also help to stretch the muscles, muscle tissue, and also to flex the joints so that more blood, oxygenated blood, can get in through all the small joints and penetrate the muscle tissue and down to the cellular level, and to bathe them in fresh oxygenated blood. So, all of that is sort of the holistic view of the body and mind, and how the yoga and the breathing, the exercise, and the meditation helps to bring our body and mind back into its natural harmony. And we have to work both on the body and the mind to see how they're intimately connected. Because again, awareness is in every cell of our body. So that is what I like to call the first stage of healing, which is meditation. To get back into that more harmonious vibration is really the first stage of deeper meditation. And but it takes a lot of practice. But it's right here. The breathing in the body is really the only thing that you really can control in this world. And we can't control the external world. We can only control to a certain extent, our body and mind. And that is the purpose of the practice of Dhamma. And all the other things that you read in the Dhamma, like right thought, right view, right thought, right speech, action, livelihood, all of those are ways of helping to maintain that, to minimize the unhealthy types of vibrations that come into us, and to keep that process of stabilized, and to deepen until gradually people are able to develop the rest of the way to peace and happiness, basically. But we really have to understand what is the nature of peace and happiness. And every religion and philosophy and other, they all promise to deliver on that, right? Whether they do or not is another thing. But the Buddha invited people to come and see. That's one of the definitions of the Dhamma. Ehipassiko, come and see, inviting you to come and see. Come and sit down for 10 minutes. Take 6 deep, slow breaths, uninterrupted. I mean, the Buddha didn't say that necessarily, but let's see, for example, right? And you do that, immediately, it can take hours. You can almost feel that immediately. And so, once you get that experience, and of course, then you start to understand a whole other way of learning how to, to live. So, how many of you this morning in your meditation, you tried to kind of do some deep, slow breathing, in your meditation, start of meditation, or even come back to it in the middle of the meditation? Anybody feel any effects of that? Could anybody feel some what I call subtler vibrations in the body? What's that? And were those subtle vibrations kind of pleasant? They're kind of cool just to feel them, right? You weren't thinking about the past and the future at that time, right? You're content with the present moment. So anyway, just again, that's just a simple, direct experience or proof to yourself about, the potential of, using those as useful, skillful tools to help us in our, you could say, fight against the external world, because there's so many, negative vibrations and pressures coming to us from all different ways. And, we need something that's immediately effective and that's natural. Now people, most people they have to go and take a bunch of drugs and pills and other things just to help to calm down, right? But knowing these, skillful tools that are natural and are always available to us and really don't cost any money, and you can do it at any time in any place, then it's like a revolutionary. But the only thing is you have to remember how to do it. And it takes time to gradually cultivate that. But unfortunately, most people are in a rush. They don't have patience. So that's why it's easier to take pills and drugs and other things rather than working on it from the more natural standpoint. So anyway, and how many people during the walking meditation that we were doing this morning also were able to kind of, even while you were walking, feel those kind of sensations, or think they could get a sense of what the present moment means? Where there's just sounds coming and going in the background, even thoughts in your mind, but subtler sensations in the body. We're just holding the attention there, not even allowing it to chase after all the sights and sounds and thoughts that are whizzing, about above. And that's another thing. A lot of people think that meditation means shutting out your thoughts or, shutting out the outside world. Well, one could do that if one was to attain formless jhanas or something. That's not easy to do, and it's not even necessary. So it's not about trying to stop your thoughts or push out the outside world. It's about developing an anchor that's subtler than those thoughts. And the anchor is the subtle vibrations of breathing and the other cellular vibrations that are going on virtually all over the body. Those are usually subtler than your thoughts, or not necessarily all the thoughts, but when you're in touch with those vibrations, then when the thoughts arise, you kind of see them before they've erupted on the surface. Because you bring your attention down to where the thoughts are arising, which is about the same level as where the subtle breaths are occurring, or other subtle little, the ability to feel the blood pulsing in your veins. Even that's a very subtle thing. Doctors have to use a special, what they call a stethoscope to hear that, right? But in meditation, you can actually feel that once the mind gets more centered. Tune into those, and therefore the distractions even of pains and sounds and even your thoughts won't pull you out of that, because again, it's like an anchor, and those things are always there. And once you know that they're there and you tune in and see how, yes, then it becomes easier and easier to be able to come back and get connected with that, easier and easier, as well as then protecting that in one's daily life by minimizing the kinds of unnecessary distractions and other things that would sort of take you away from that. It's very similar to, our thoughts are like a thief. In fact, how many people tried counting their breaths this morning from 1 to 10? After I led you through it one time, then I said, try to do it on your own. How many people got lost in their thoughts? How many people made it 10? First time? Okay. Well, so that's actually a very good meditation. I would say, there's tons of meditation techniques you learn, but in terms of this type of developing awareness and getting centered in the present moment and in the body, to be able to count your breaths from 1 to 10 without the mind getting lost. That's what I would consider the first level of concentration. Even that's a minor one, but even it's a miracle for most people. But that would be a realistic kind of goal to use whenever you start meditation, to start with that and then see how many times it takes you. You have to come back and start at 1 again several times. So it helps you to be more on your toes and watching for those thoughts to come up and take you away. But anyway, so the thoughts are like a thief who comes in your house. Okay, another scenario. Imagine this. You're sitting on your sofa in the evening. And maybe you're watching television, some show. And maybe, you're not mindful and you're just engrossed in it, or the love scenes or cowboys and Indians or whatever it is. And you don't hear a car pulling up in front of your house because you're distracted, not centered in the body. And you don't hear the dog barking. Or you might hear it in the distance and don't give it, any thought. And then you don't hear the person climbing over the chain link fence, making some noise, climbing into your backyard. And you don't hear them, jimmying your window or, opening your window with a screwdriver or something, crawling into they crawl in, they steal your valuable things, and you don't even know that they got in until you go in the kitchen to make some coffee and you're like, oh, where all my silver? So that's quite often what happens to us when we're, meditating. We get carried away in our thoughts because we weren't, grounded or centered. But let's say, go back to the sofa, but this time you're watching the TV, but you got 50% of your attention at least feeling some part of your body, feeling the weight of the body pressing on the sofa, feeling the clothing touching your skin, or just, some sensations, at least some percent, not even 50%, 25%. You're just aware of some kind of physical sensation. That means your mind is at least not totally lost in it. There's some space. That's where you hear the sound of the car pulling up. Where you hear the dog barking. You start to think, well, my friend would climb over the back fence. My dog wouldn't bark at my friend. And you start to kind of prepare yourself. Oh, maybe something's happening. Okay, wait a minute. And you hear them climbing over the back fence. The dog barking more angry. And you realize, oh, get your friend. So you mindfully get up, you go toward the back, you stand by the window. The person is, climbing through the window, and you put a big bag over it and call the cops. Right? Okay, that's mindfulness. Or that's the practice of meditation and dealing with the hindrances. That, by developing the concentration where you're able to, count the breaths from 1 to 10, and then from there, basically just have that sense of the body and the breathing and other sensations that you should be able to feel quite easily by that time. And but you can still function and you can still do things if you move slowly and mindfully. But if you're rushing, then you'll lose it. If you train yourself in the practice of mindfulness by standing up, pausing, mindfully going, not rushing, but just being aware of what you're doing, you'll be able to maintain that at least to a good degree. And it will be a very relaxing kind of vibration. Anyway, that's how that practice can be developed. Again, using the natural, what we have with us all the time. Look, we have to carry this body around with us 24/7, 365. What's the next number? What's the next number? You don't know how many years you'll live. So if we have to carry this body, this 100+ pound body around all the time, why not use it for something very important? They would never think like that, right? Oh, they use it, yeah, to pump iron and gain metals and all kinds of things like that, impress others. That may be useful for mundane, life to a certain extent, but as we all know and heard stories, it also leads to probably more problems than it was worth, premature death and all kind of other things. So why not use this body for a real good purpose of maintaining the connection to the present moment? And in turn, then maintaining the ability to see your thoughts more clearly and to be able to let go of any unnecessary thoughts or urges or temptations that just take you out of that. So that's really the whole practice of the Dhamma, because if you study all the different aspects of Dhamma, including like in the Sabbasava Sutta, the 7 ways of overcoming the defilements, you'll see that they include that, right? Avoiding places that are unseemingly kind of places, and restraining the thoughts, and so on. All those practices of the Dhamma have only that purpose of preserving the nervous system in its more tranquil space, so that you have the clarity of the consciousness to be able to maintain that connection and much more easily, develop mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom that leads to the stages of, ultimately to liberation. Okay, so I don't know, came a long ways, it seems. One cell organism in the body. So does anybody have any, I think I'll stop with this talk here. Does anybody have any questions while it's still fresh in your mind about anything that I might have talked about? Yes.
The body seems to have its own rhythm. Its work, as you said, the parasympathetic system control this rhythm. And when we interfere with it using the sympathetic system, like this morning walking, and by lifting the foot up, put it down, we interfere with the regular rhythm of walking. And I stumbled 2 or 3 times, I almost falling because deviate from the normal rhythm. And also, like for eating, you said chew it 35 times or so. I was watching the food in my mouth and roll it from jaw to jaw. I bit my tongue twice.
Yeah, well, you're probably chewing too fast.
So I think, like for walking, if we just, fix the mind on the normal rhythm of walking, not make it the way we want it, will be better than it just tell how the foot lift up, put it down, and you lose balance.
You lose balance because you've trained it in unwholesome ways. That means in being in the future. So you're rushing here and there. People are running, they're doing things, rushing because the mind is in a hurry to get to the future. And that's why the body's been trained that way. So to retrain it it may take some time for that to happen. But the point is, these kind of exercises that we're doing, especially like the slow motion walking, that's not something you're going to be doing all the time. You know, that's a training period, so that we can learn how to stay more in the present moment. And once you are able to do that, you can walk faster, but still keep the mind in its state of awareness, you know, feeling other things and so on. So, you know, it's all about training. It's not necessarily something you're going to be doing all the time. But, and sure, there's going to be many times when you do have to sort of speed up. But you have to know how to, when you finish something that's necessary, you know how to then stop and pause and slow back down. But most people don't know how to do that. Because once they get wound up, they just keep going and going and going till they have a nervous breakdown, and so on. So the mindfulness training is about, again, the middle path, balance between inside and outside. And so we might have to move fast and lose our mindfulness at some point, that really an intense level. But to know, to when you're done doing something that you needed to move more faster to stop and slow down, take a couple deep breaths, reconnect to the present moment, and so on, and be able to go in and out of it like that, kind of effortlessly. And the time that you spend in that more, the parasympathetic of the nervous system, then the more that you'll be able to manage when you get into sympathetic mode. It's not going to, you know, go overboard and go haywire. You'll know how to, you know, kind of keep it to a manageable level. In order to prevent making mistakes, that's the main part. It's to prevent you from stumbling over something and breaking your leg or hurting somebody else in our rush and other things like that. It's all about that. Again, the Buddhist teaching is all about suffering and to remove the cause of suffering. And the main cause of suffering is, you know, the mind being in the future and not being mindful. That's where 95 or 99% of the problems and mistakes and accident are going to happen. Yes.
Okay. When the mind is somewhat collected and concentration is deep, would that necessarily mean that thoughts can be kept at bay? Like the probability of them not intruding would be more likely when the concentration is deepened?
That's one of the characteristics of concentration. You can only notice basically one thing at a time. And so if you're continually noticing your breathing, it doesn't give the mind time to focus on other things. They're still maybe coming and going in the background, but it takes extra effort for your mind to then identify that object and remember your experience from it in the past and then projecting it into the future. All that takes time, mental time. So it helps to, you know, again, that anchor to the present moment. And so the thoughts are still be coming and going in the background, but they're no longer disturbing.
Mm-hmm.
Is it okay to feel like numbness, like your body?
Well, numbness may become because you know, maybe the way you're sitting, you're pressuring a nerve or a blood vessel, and you know, the blood circulation gets minimized, or you might feel some numbness. But the short time that you're going to spend in meditation like that is not going to cause any type of any damage to the body. You maybe feel numb. You might feel the little pins and needles, but just use that as to relax around it. And just know it's perfect. Or if you want, you can wiggle your toes, and that'll help bring blood back into your feet and legs. And also, you see, when the mind and body, what happens in meditation is the psychophysical energies kind of get withdrawn from the periphery. Normally, when we're active, that means all of our blood and everything is out at the surface of the body, doing that. But when you meditate, then those energies get withdrawn, and that then becomes a concentration power. And also, it'll feel like you're getting a little bit numb, but that's because of that energy vibration, that strong energy vibration that you will start feeling when you maintain that inward sort of attention, especially to the body and the sensations. And that creates a magnetic field, within the body. And so that can be experienced as a kind of a numbness. But it's not going to be anything, detrimental, because you're not really going to be staying in it probably for more than an hour or 2 or 3 at the most, in meditation. Yes.
One day your speech, you had mentioned something about mental technology. Can you elaborate on that?
Mental technology. Mindfulness and concentration and wisdom. And also there are some other things, but a little bit more advanced, but even the perception of impermanence. But the Buddha explains all these things in the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Is really the mental technology. That means we're using our thoughts in a new way. And we're harnessing the natural inward functions and energies. We're harnessing them in a new way to effect a purpose. So instead of, like, say, reacting and to external distractions, and we harness that energy that's going out to rub this and look there and getting distracted, or just your internal thoughts of worry and anxiety. We're harnessing those by bringing that energy from there and focusing it in the middle, in the present moment. It's like a magnifying glass. Now you're focusing all that energy that was dissipated through all of your other types of physical and mental, things, distractions. You're focusing all that energy like through a magnifying glass. It becomes very hot, so to speak. And it sort of burns through all the deeper layers, so it penetrates deeper into the unconscious so that you can see the subtler energies, and you can see your urges and other thoughts where they're just initially coming up, loosening up from the unconscious mind, and that energy will zap them like a laser beam. That's why I often call it the laser beam of awareness. When you zap anything with awareness, it vanishes. It's really it's like that. Most people know nothing about it. They want to watch Star Wars and all these things, zap it with these things. They don't know how to internalize that. So, you can zap your hatred. If you're caught up in some angry thought toward somebody, zap it with mindfulness. Anger. It's just a bubble. Detach from it, pull back from it, and it vanishes. Because our thoughts and emotions only continue when you're feeding them with your thoughts of I, me, mine, other. I like this, I don't like this. You keep on feeding these type of emotions, or you identify them as a poor little, whatever. You keep feeding. So you, when that mindfulness, you zap it with wisdom. That's why wisdom is important. Mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. These are the three technologies that we use. Most people don't use that. Most people are not mindful. Most people are not concentrated. Most people don't have the wisdom, at least the wisdom of the Buddha or the Dhamma. They don't. They have the opposite types of wisdom and motivations. So this is at high tech, but we're harnessing the natural energies are there, but just shifting them and applying it to these other ways that then help to elevate, and produce healing. I think we probably will stop there. And if you have any other questions, then during the breaks tonight or other times, better write them down, and then we'll try to answer them in tonight's questions and answer session. But now we want to continue and have our get back to our meditation practice. Okay. So just take a deep, slow breath while it's still fresh in your mind. We're going to stand up in a minute, but just for